Thank you so much. Shri Jaswant Singh.
Madam Speaker, how much time do I have? I shall accordingly.
You have 26 minutes.
How?
26 minutes.
I'll tailor my intervention accordingly. This is really an extraordinary circumstance in which we are discussing this very sensitive and deeply emotional issue. I do share and sympathize with the sentiments that my distinguished colleague, with whom we have had the benefit of working together in the same cabinet, Honorable Balu, indeed all his other colleagues. He knows very well that whereas I sympathize with his sentiment, I have difficulty with some of the opinions that he has expressed, but that does not distract from the totality of the situation. And this is a very unhappy, challenging, and trying situation in which we discuss this subject. The government, our dear government, is clearly at its wit's end. Now, I recognize, Madam Speaker, for this government with its capability challenged, also is challenged by capacity and competence. For it to travel to its wit's end is not a very long journey, but that's precisely why it makes it so important that what we say here is recognized by the government and acted upon with at least the residual competence that it could demonstrate on the subject. I do wish to take this opportunity to express my sympathies with my dear and distinguished friend, the Minister of State for External Affairs. I did not wish that this agony be inflicted upon him, क्योंकि रोज़े के दिन हैं स्पीकर साहब, अब उनको ऐसे मौक़ों पर ये तकलीफ दी जाए, मेरे मित्र शायद मुझे माफ़ी बख्शेंगे, ये वक्त मैंने तय नहीं किया था आपके, तो आपकी नमाज में अगर कोई अड़चन आती हो तो मुझे माफ़ी बख्शें. I want to, this particular discussion, madam, really is not subject to brilliant oratorical flourishes or really even speech making. We cannot move away from identifying the substance. What is the substance? And therefore, let me at the very beginning of the discussion share with you as to where the NDA stood on the subject, because those are 4 or 5, 6 issues which will define our approach to the entire issue, and which I continue to believe are still relevant and can still, if acted upon, find an answer to what appears to be an embroidery. The first is, sir, that the NDA stood for Sri Lanka's constitutional and territorial integrity. And I repeat that the government's view, it appears, they have adopted this policy because it's a correct policy, it's a sane policy. We continue to stand for Sri Lanka's constitutional and territorial integrity. There was a question raised about the 13th Amendment. This amendment, Madam, is an amendment of the Constitution of Sri Lanka. We stand for this amendment, but if the present Sri Lankan government doesn't like to call it 13th Amendment, they can call it 14th or 15th or by whatever name. But this amendment is a necessary step, and it is a step that ought to be taken because it is directed at a certain purpose. That purpose ought to be fulfilled. That is what our recommendation would be, not any strict commitment only to the phraseology of the word, though there is a symbolism to it, of the word 13th Amendment. So there is Madam, there's a third suggestion, recommendation, and very strong assertion that I make to my friends in that beautiful country, Sri Lanka. It must revert to peace and prosperity. But to revert to peace and lasting prosperity, they must make a distinction between the Tamils and the LTTE. A great deal of the mistake arises by this confusion. It is possibly a confusion that afflicts some of us also. Once we remove the aspect of equating the LTTE with the totality of the Tamil population, whether in Sri Lanka or the Tamil diaspora or the Tamils of such enormous talent and ability and competence that the state of Tamil Nadu has given to India, I am astonished at because surely, madam, when genes of competence are being distributed by the Creator, I feel cheated coming from the desert of Rajasthan. All the genes seem to have gone to Tamil Nadu. we have no competence left. So I urge my friends here also.
Honourable Member, you have no reason to feel cheated.
But I do urge all of us to reflect on this distinction. I don't want to go into the origins of the LTTE, how that fault was committed, that's history. Perhaps not entirely relevant to our today's discussion. Therefore, I limit myself to this and what the NDA stood for. The next, it's again a suggestion, rather. I think our friends, also perhaps in Tamil Nadu, we must make a distinction between minorityism and ethnicity. The Tamils in Sri Lanka are not simply a minority. They are an ethnic grouping that must be recognized, respected, and treated as a separate ethnic group. And if we do that, then a great deal of the route to finding solutions will be found by us. Now, I say this, madam, I realize that these were some of the planks that the NDA had. This is not the total enunciation, naturally, of policy. Now, I want to add to it some of the present. I do wish to add my voice to a unanimous expression of view by the Tamil Nadu Assembly. That unanimous expression of view by the Tamil Nadu Assembly is a right, is a sovereign function, and is a duty, indeed a duty of the Tamil Nadu Assembly as presently elected, representing the Tamil Nadu state. It does not behove anybody here or outside of India to belittle the views that the entire Assembly of Tamil Nadu has expressed. I do not wish to further belabor this point. Surely it must be understood, because if I have time, I'll share a thought or two on the transformed nature of today's foreign policy. There's one more thing I will add briefly, which is what my distinguished colleague and the leader of the opposition had once raised. It's about Kachati. Now, the Kachatigu Island, I believe that the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu has lodged an appeal in the Supreme Court. Kachatigu, madam, was ceded by us. to Sri Lanka, principally to facilitate fishing. But the fishing rights of the Tamil fishermen were preserved fully. It's that one. And secondly, there's a Catholic, if I'm not mistaken, there's a Catholic monastery or church or function there. Annually there is. Now these are, see the problem around with our fishery is entirely coastal fishery. It's not industrial fishery. And because it is coastal fishery, in waters like surrounding Kachativu, there will be occasions when Sri Lankan fishermen come, dry their nets, or Indian fishermen go there, but those occasions must not ever be used to shoot at or kill Tamil fishermen. That happens because A, we are not fully administrating the understanding which surrounds the seeding of this little island. We must, I can only urge the government to ensure that this understanding is fully implemented. There's a second aspect here, that I do believe, I shared it with my distinguished colleague earlier, there is need for us, for this government. Because we are a coastal fishery, and there are millions of fishermen all along from Gujarat to Bengal. You can circumnavigate coastal India. They are all coastal fisheries. There is very little industrial fishing here, which thanks be to the limited options that coastal fishing offers. Please work towards arriving at a SAARC agreement or memorandum or understanding all the countries of SAARC for coastal fisheries. In addition, now these were some of, I'm being very brief now. I've taken only...
You have time, you have time.
No, I won't take much time. But these are the planks to which I've added Tamil Nadu's present concern. The foundation of the policy must be that there has to be a distinction now recognized by the government between the Tamil people and LTT. It must be done. That our neighbor, good neighbor, Sri Lanka must also recognize. There are 2-3 general points that I'll make. There are 2-3 strands of foreign policy. One is what I call the do something syndrome. I don't think the wisdom of India's foreign policy is governed by, irrespective of what the situation, do something syndrome. But the reverse is even more killing. And the reverse is the unenrolled do nothing syndrome. Now, I appeal to the government of India, please don't fall into either of these traps. There is the imperative need to recognize that India, not because we are a South Asian hegemon, that we are not, but India has a role and a responsibility towards this entire neighborhood, and it must provide that voice, that leadership, and that guidance. It was rather poignant intervention that the Honorable the Honorable the Prime Minister made. I hope what I say will be understood. Of course, nobody stands for corruption, but there could be, Madam, a corruption of policy. And you could have a situation in which, because of corruption of policy, the collective ill of mounted policies today is borne by India. Do I wish to cite Jammu Kashmir? Do I wish to cite Tibet and China? Do I wish to cite IPKF? I wish to cite the situation in Sri Lanka. I don't want to go into that litany of errors. Please reflect on it. I conclude now by sharing with the House a very fine speech made by Her Excellency the former President of Sri Lanka. I had the honor and the distinction of working with her for a great many years, and we resolved a number of issues, including what then appeared to be a very unpopular step, which was the free trade area agreement with Sri Lanka, which now flourishes. Tamil Nadu has benefited, Kerala has benefited, Karnataka has benefited. Her Excellency, Madam Chandrika Kumar, and I'll conclude with that, Madam. This was, she chose a quiet July Sunday to speak her mind on the aftermath of a war that has ended more than 2 years back. This is where she, the report quotes her. The victorious government and the Sinhala community must comprehend that the Tamil community is different from the LTTE. I applaud her for voicing that sentiment. I too am glad, extremely happy, that the war has ended and terrorism has been defeated. But I cannot bind myself to the fact that although we have won the civil war, we have not even begun to win the battle for peace. It's a very wise statement by a former president of Sri Lanka, who, if I might mention, Madam Speaker, she's a victim of successive acts of terrorism. Her late father, a very distinguished leader of Sri Lanka, her husband, another casualty to terrorism. She herself has lost an eye to an attack on her. For her to say this really gives a great strength to people like us who are students of foreign policy and current affairs. But she goes on. An essential prerequisite for peace, a stable and strong government, and prosperity is a democratic, pluralistic society. This is the only magic potion I know to bind together diverse peoples of a multi-ethnic, multi-linguistic, multi-religious, and multi-cultural country like ours in one undivided and strong nation. It goes on. I don't wish to read the other parts of it. It's a longish speech. It's very worthwhile. I submit to my distinguished friends and colleagues from Tamil Nadu if they would go through the text of it and read it, because in this they will find a great deal of sense, possibly in this also. We are beginning to move towards a final resolution of what has troubled the Sri Lankan nation for all these years. Madam, as one of the small cogs in the NDA machinery, I had also endeavored to work for a resolution of this issue, which we must work. The theory of being uninvolved, which appears to be the policy of the government of India, will not work. We have to remain involved because the people of Tamil Nadu, as an ethnic community, overspill in their sentiments, in their cultural foundation. We cannot ignore this. If we ignore it at the cost of the internal stability of India. As it is, Madam, the internal stability of India is greatly challenged. And we have at our home a gravely challenged government. Between these two, The answer that has to be found is the collective wisdom of all of us here. With that appeal on behalf of my party, thank you very much.
Shri N.S.V. Chitan.
Madam Speaker, I thank you very much for giving this opportunity